So good to see you in the midst of anxious times to give thanksgiving to God, to gather, to support, to love, to encourage. This is our walk of faith. I hope that this message gives you encouragement. I just wanted to check something. Are these anxious times, or should I change the sermon? Are they kind of anxious times? Right? Pastor David Nordstrand is a pastor over at St. Thomas Lutheran Church. Some of us know him. He's also a major. He's a chaplain in the Air Force. And some other pastors we were gathering, and we were talking about, it seems like the congregations we're working with are kind of anxious. Kind of a big word. What does that really mean? I mean, maybe a little bit on stewardship, a little bit about the future. So we use that word. And then by the blessings of God, Major chaplain described to us in about 20 minutes, David explained all the possibilities of war in the next 4 years. Now, I wish he would have said, I worry about these things so you don't need to worry, but he didn't do that. He just shared, not confidential, but enough stuff that I hadn't been paying attention. And so unanimously, after he got done, we all said, forget the congregations, we're anxious, right? Because there's a lot to be concerned about. It's a complex world. And so I was hoping that in the midst of this, it appears to me, we could pray for God to change all of the environment, and so that it would be peaceful and easy for which us to live. But somehow, I think that God is calling us forth in the midst of this anxiety to spread the gospel message in new ways. And we're the ones who have this opportunity to share the love of God in this time, in this place, to reduce anxiety, not by shutting out the world, but by describing the good news of Jesus Christ. Encouragement for Thanksgiving. There's so many wonderful things in your life. Perhaps you're the type of person that's an optimist. The glass is half full. You've heard of pessimists. The glass is half empty. Some of us are strategic. We say, what's it full of? What is the drink? But in this, a theological treatise was given to me. Pretty interesting. It was provocative. It was quite accessible. It had to do with a Disney movie called Pollyanna. Has anybody seen that? Boy, I encourage you to go back and look at it. One of the members of our congregation gave it to me, and she is struggling in her health right now. And she gave it to me as a homework assignment. If you remember that plot at all, it was when Haley Mills, I'm not sure, I'm looking at my wife here, one of her first movies, I think that she came. And Haley was the daughter of a missionary who died. And Haley had to go live with Jane Wyman, if you know that character, and Jane can do that dour very good. And so here's this person that has suffered great loss, but in the midst of it, Pollyanna comes in and is always looking at the glad things in life. Do you know how disruptive that is to have somebody that's always happy looking at the glad things in life? And so the movie goes around that, and people are confused why she's doing that. But by doing that, she never preached, you shouldn't be this way, but she would just encourage to be able to look at the good things, because that was the gift that her father had given her, which is to look at the glad things. And ultimately, she shaped the pastor who had been intimidated to preach very dour sermons, very, very threatening sermons. And she, through the grace of God, allowed him to experience the over 826 verses in scriptures about joy and gladness. But it is a habit to develop a way of looking at life in glad for what God has done. And it's been ancient times. I mean, if you take a look at the first lesson, I was so touched that Joel, in the scripture here, it's not just us. This idea of fearing what is in the midst of our lives. Do you notice that he's counseling the soil itself? Do not fear, O soil. I thought the good soil of Nebraska and Iowa need to hear that right now. Right? So tremendously depleted of water. I've heard that it's so depleted that you don't have to worry about the ground freezing because there's no moisture in it. It's very, very challenging. But that the Lord has done good things. And do not fear, you animals of the field. So this pervasiveness and calling of God's love in the midst of anxiety continues. our time. I love the image of soil. Vicar Caleb did a great job of preaching about the future. You may know that our offering is going to go to Trees for Tanzania. All of our offering is going to be dedicated, along with many, many other congregations, to help support the planting of saplings by Mount Kilimanjaro. Some of you have spent time there. You know what it looks like. You know how it's been changed. But Luther's quote that Vicar Caleb talked about was, concerned if the end of the world was coming tomorrow, Luther was asked, what would you do? And his quote was, I'd plant a tree today. Right? And so this nurture of God's soil and of God's creation, I'm so thankful that we can be part of that. Give generously. I love it also. I'm learning as a pastor how to work with confirmation students. I love working it. I love the way they're doing it over there. They have a lot of those students, but as the students are helping plant, confirmation students will also tend for a minimum of 2 years to make sure that these trees grow. Isn't that cool? Watch out, confirmation students. I'm paying attention to this type of stewardship and this type of involvement. I give thanks for a God who has created such a place of beauty known as our earth and our encouragement in which to do this. I look forward to, after the service, Jan, to meet the person. I was going to put you a little bit on the spot. Would you make an introduction at this time of your friend who is at worship with you? And I've asked Jan to do that at this time. Speak loudly.
Okay. My sister Deanna Isaacson was a missionary nurse, midwife in Liberia, West Africa for over 30 years. She passed away in 2000. This is Edwin Palomo he was a good friend of hers and lived at her house, helped her with her house when he was younger, and he's now at the seminary up in St. Paul, Minnesota, at the Lutheran Seminary. Oh. Too late now. Anyway, so this is Edwin.
I'm very glad to be here today. I came from Liberia. I'm a Lutheran church pastor. Ordained minister. I've been serving the ministry there for 8 years. Since the war, I was there and I lived with her, which she came back home. So in St. Paul, studying at Lutheran Seminary, Congregation Mission and Leadership, Master of Arts. I'm here today to spend the time with them. I'm also glad to be here at the service to worship together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So my point is, in the midst of anxiety, we are not alone, right? We're brothers and sisters called together by the love of God. And I thank you, Jan. The next lesson comes from 1 Timothy. I think that this encouragement, if you ask for a practical takeaway, how to give thanksgiving in the midst of anxiety, is I urge you that supplications, your own life, asking for God's help in your own life, for prayers and for intercessions, those prayers for other people, and thanksgivings be made for everyone. And that includes us. It also includes for our leaders. And this type of filling the vacuum of life, instead of worrying about life, of taking an active prayer response is a takeaway, and I encourage you to do that. Rick Warren, excellent pastor, a lot of fun, so wonderfully accessible, wrote this about worry. It said, don't worry about anything. But we all have pet worries, right? We all have things that we worry about. Finances, jobs, relationships, maybe it's marriage or kids or health. And he says there's 3 problems with worry, though, and how it impacts Thanksgiving. Worry is unhelpful, it's unreasonable, and it's unhealthy. Okay? Unhelpful, because it never accomplishes anything. It never solves anything. It's stewing without doing. Did that look like a word Warren moved there? But he did. But isn't that right? You're stewing without doing, and what happens? Nothing gets done. It's like racing your car engine. You create a lot of smoke and noise, but you don't go anywhere. Worry never has solved a problem. Worry cannot change the past. If you worry about it, worry cannot control the future. It only makes us miserable today. It's unhelpful. It doesn't work. Any questions? Right? I think that's a nice, short summary. So it's unhelpful. It's also unreasonable because it exaggerates your problems. It makes mountains out of molehills. It just makes problems seem bigger and bigger. The more you review something when you're worried about it, the bigger it gets. To worry about something you can't change is useless. To worry about something you can change is stupid. Just change it. Either way, don't worry. And last, it's unhealthy. The body was not made to worry. When you worry, you get ulcers and backaches and headaches and insomnia. Our bodies were not made to worry. Plants and animals don't worry. The only thing that worries in all of God's creation is people. We worry, and we weren't made to worry. It makes us unhappy and unhealthy. The Old English word for worry is the word to strangle or to choke. And that's what worry does. It strangles the life out of you. That's not natural. So, unhelpful, unreasonable, unhealthy. So you weren't born worrying. This is what got me. You have to learn to worry. And we're teaching a lot of people these days. And I'd love for us to be the people who teach people about faith and about God's providence and about God's love. To address worry, but help people learn. So his last couple lines is, you have to learn to worry, you have to practice to be good at it. But the good news is that worry is learned, and that means you can learn something else. It's good reading. And so in this, I just ask, as you receive this gospel message again, as we move into this, and Christ says, do not worry about your life. I love that. I read with emphasis, how can you, by worrying, add a single hour to the span of your life? In the midst of this Thanksgiving season, we have been proclaiming the Pentecost message, this message of God's love for the past, for our present, and for the future. Christ is King. And so my encouragement for you and for me in this time of Thanksgiving is to have a center of balance in our life that's united in this cross. Our past, our present, our future, where Christ is King. And that is the center of balance, where we give thanks to the giver of